What a great question.
However, when you're getting started, there are a lot of skill sets to learn.
There are two main reasons.
That's just the way it is sometimes.
Is that you don't know what you don't know.
So I actually have two conflating thoughts on this topic.
I can really only suggest what I did, and that was...
So if you would have asked me this a few years ago, might have given you a different answer, but as of today...
I can think of two reasons for that.
It is a topic that gets asked quite a bit.
And my answer has changed over time.
And in my opinion...
there's a number of reasons for that.
And he told me this one very crucial thing that literally blew my mind and kind of changed everything.
A question that I asked so many times in live streams and of more experienced bloggers.
It's a great question. And, well, in my experience, I think it's good to do both of those things.
Okay, so you're probably wondering, what is everybody talking about? Well, I recently asked a few YouTuber and blogger friends this one important question. When you are a beginner blogger starting out, should you focus just on building one website, or should you try to build out multiple niche websites? Here's what they had to say.
For a new blogger, I would totally recommend focusing on one site in the very beginning. I love having multiple websites. I think everybody who's into this should build multiple websites. I love the diversification of the income, the diversification of the marketing. I wouldn't want a Google algorithm update to hit my only source of income because I only had one website. However, when you're getting started, there are a lot of skill sets to learn. And I'd rather that you focused on one site and focused on a topic that you're particularly interested in, so that, a lot of the other skill sets around researching and writing and stuff, those kinds of things are going to come a lot more naturally if we pick one topic and we do a good job of learning a lot about it, and if it's something that we like. The other problem with having multiple sites, especially in the beginning, is that you're going to need to jump around back and forth between them all. You're going to have to write an article on this one, and then another one on this one, and one over here on this one. If we have too many sites, even two, that focus is being split, and we're not getting a critical mass of content on any one site. I found that if you just don't have enough content on a website, it's rare for that site to ever really get picked up and treated as really any level of authority. So if we focus all of our energy onto that one site first, get enough content onto that site, build some authority, and get some momentum actually moving forward for us, then we're going to be in a great position to take all the skills we've developed on that first site and start applying it to a second one.
Hey, it's Doug Cunnington here, and I think it's best to focus on one site. There are two main reasons. Number one, often when we hear about people with a portfolio of sites who are making a lot of money, they've been at it for several years. So you're thinking, hey, I should have 10 sites, but you're looking at someone who's been doing it for 10 years, and maybe you're in year 1 or even year 3 or 4, and it takes time to build up to that point. The second issue with focusing on multiple sites is if you're early in your career, there's a strong chance you're going to make some mistakes. And if you make a mistake on one site, that sucks, you can go fix it. But if you make a mistake on one site and then you're scaling it out to several sites, maybe you got 7 sites out there, now you've compounded the effect. You have 7 sites where you've made that mistake. And let's say it's not just one mistake. Let's say it's one mistake every time you placed an image or every time you put an affiliate link. All of a sudden, you have a huge problem on your hands, and it hurts even more, maybe 7 times more, if you made that mistake again and again and again on other sites. So I encourage you to focus on one site, and you'll be much happier and less stressed out. That's a really important thing.
What a great question. And what is interesting about this question is how my answer to it has changed over the years as I've been in this industry. In the beginning, it was 100%, build lots of sites, plant lots of seeds, watch them all grow. But now that I'm a couple of years down the line, I am no longer satisfied with a couple of, tiny plants. Now I want Jack and the Beanstalk. And I have finally come to the realization that I will only have that gigantic beanstalk that Jack has from that magic bean if I stop planting seeds everywhere in the hopes that one of them will just magically turn into it. I think it's totally fine to start lots of sites, but instead I think of just continually starting sites, from here to the end of time. Take a look at those seeds and see if one of them looks like a magic beanstalk. One of them has, better growth or other signals that it could take off with maybe the least amount of work, or maybe the effort that you put into it would have the maximum impact, and go with that one. I am no longer planting tons and tons of seeds. I'm ready to take one to the moon, and that's not going to happen if I spend a lot of time with my little sites. It's just not.
In my opinion, focusing on one site and having many sites within your portfolio both have their place in creating content sites. A lot of people make mistakes with the niches that they choose when they first start, or with their domain name, and they'll narrow down far too much so they can't build a big site. So that's when a lot of people will have to make a second site. Ideally, with the second site, you'll make a broader domain name within a broader niche, so you can just keep expanding and expanding and expanding, and just grow that second blog as large as possible. Personally, I always recommend people stick with their hobbies or their topics of interest that they know, and with some of them, they might just be so niche down, you just have to go with a lot of little sites because of how small your hobbies and interests are. That's just the way it is sometimes, but the advantage of having a lot of smaller sites is that they do tend to be easier to sell when you look to exit, because the end multiple total value will usually be less than $250,000 US. But on the flip side of that, with one single main topic, you've only got to go through the sandbox once. If you are building links, you've only got to do all of that one time to the same domain to age it in quickly and boost its domain authority. So both have their advantages and disadvantages. In my opinion, it's going to come down to your niche, your interests and your hobbies, and working out what you can do to move forward.
What's up, guys? This is Ron with 1 Hour Professor. And first off, Keith, thank you very much for inviting me to speak on this topic. So I just want to say, the question is, should you have one site or multiple sites? Plain and simple, if you're starting out, one site is the answer to this. Multiple sites are great because you diversify, right? But the problem with that when you're starting out is that you don't know what you don't know. So my thought is always, let's focus on one site and one site only, grow that, get your full team outsourced, get everything to where it's pretty automated, and then you should have enough revenue on top of that to support the building of a second site. I say that because I think it's so important to really focus and put all of your effort into one site in the beginning to make that grow first, and then you can look into other sites. If you do it the other way, you're just gonna be scatterbrained and you're probably not gonna get anything done or really grow anything as large as it could be.
So I actually have two conflating thoughts on this topic. Most successful people will tell you to start one site and focus on growing that out without dividing your attention. And I tend to agree, it makes sense. Especially if you've got work commitments or family commitments or limited resources. This is even more true, because when you're spread thin, you end up doing a lot of nothing and run the risk of your efforts being in vain. And in most cases, your time and resources would be better suited building upwards rather than building out across multiple sites. However, I personally have a portfolio of sites, and this has allowed me to learn and test the things that I've learned out, and also test my own SEO theories. And in the long run, I'll have multiple aged assets to either continue to expand upon or flip for cash injections to fund some of my bigger projects. And because I've always seen this as a marathon, I've got no regrets with that. But what I am able to do now is put all of the other sites on a back burner while devoting all of my time and attention to just one. And then I've got those other assets in the back simmering for later.
Hey, Keith. Thanks a lot for inviting me to participate in this question of one site versus multiple sites. So I can really only suggest what I did, and that was focus on one site, and I grew it to a sizable revenue stream over the first number of years. And I really didn't launch any other sites. I kind of blogged a little bit about FastX, but I didn't spend a lot of time on FastX even in those early days. I really just focused 100% on the one site. And I grew it to a point where it was paying the bills, it was spitting off enough money to basically self-finance itself for further growth, hire writers and so forth, and also spit off enough cash to hire people to start working on any additional sites. And that was the point when I did start adding some sites. And so it's been a few years now where I still focus on my largest site. I have a few other sites that are growing to becoming fairly large, and that's worked out well. I've sold a handful along the way, and that's a huge part of the diversification strategy for me, is that grow sites to a certain amount where they're going to sell fairly quickly, but also be fairly profitable, generate a pretty good ROI. So that's what I've been doing. So I now have quite a few sites, and I'm happy about that. They are growing, and if you have the finances to finance multiple sites, I think it's a good strategy. We all know that Google updates can really impact a site. So if you have all your eggs in one site and it gets hammered by a Google update, we know that can cause a lot of problems. It can really hurt revenue. So that is actually the main reason I do diversify. Because personally, I would really just focus on one site. That would be my preference. But as a business decision, I've decided to diversify. Now, at the end of the day, if you look at my income reports, you're going to obviously notice that really I am still kind of just a one website business. I do put a lot of time in my largest site. It generates by far the largest amount of revenue. It's had its ups and downs over the years. It's been impacted by updates. It's benefited from updates, and overall the trajectory is growth. But no question, I am really still, if you look at what the other websites earned in terms of revenue, I'm still really kind of a one website business. And I think in the next 2 or 3 years, I'm going to get a little bit more of a balanced portfolio with my websites, and that's my goal, primarily for diversification. Now, if you really just don't like the idea of juggling multiple websites, I get that. I don't like it either. I do it for business decision. But there are people I know who have built up tremendous, awesome, successful website, and they only focus on the one, and that's worked really, really well for them. I'm kind of hedging, and so I've gone the multiple site approach, but I did wait a long time before I did that. Hope that answers your question. Thanks for asking.
So if you would have asked me this a few years ago, I might have given you a different answer, but as of today, I would definitely choose building one large site over multiple smaller sites. There's a lot of reasons for this, but the biggest one for me is quality. When you focus all your energy on one site, it'll lead to better writing, better internal linking. You're going to go deeper into the subtopics on your site. You're going to do a better job with keyword research. You're probably going to take the time to build out social profiles, and so on. All these things lead to a higher quality site. I think this is going to be huge going forward. We have a lot more people that are building sites now. You have all this AI content that's coming out right now, which is of lower quality. Anything that you can do to separate yourself from the pack is going to give you a better chance of succeeding. Now, with all that being said, what I would do is build 2 large sites. That's going to give you the same benefits that I just mentioned, but without putting all your eggs in one basket.
I think beginners should focus on building one site rather than multiple sites. I can think of 2 reasons for that. First, I think that it's really easy to make mistakes starting out. Being there, done that, and it's easier to change course if you only have one site, fewer articles to deal with, whatever you need to correct at that point. The second reason is I think most people start out doing this part-time with a limited budget, and publishing more than one site would probably overstretch your resources. Whereas if you have a single site, then you can take your time, research your topics, possibly write your own articles. All you have to do is really publish 2 to 3 articles per week, and 6 months later you have a website with 60 articles, and you can start getting some feedback from Google, see if you can get them to rank. And that might be a good point for you to consider launching your next site if all goes well, but I would say not before that.
So thank you, Keith, for inviting me onto your channel and talking about this topic. It is a topic that gets asked quite a bit. Should you focus on one website, or should you build a portfolio of websites? Well, my opinion is if you are just starting, you should focus on one website. And that word focus should be at the forefront of your mind. You really need to get one successful website under your belt, or at least have the experience of building a website before you consider moving on to the next project. Only once when you have one successful website which is bringing you in enough money to reinvest into that one website and then have some spare cash left over to invest in a different website, would I ever consider making a second website. Even when you're more experienced, I'm now 4 years into this business and I have a successful team behind me. Even we get sidetracked and neglect some of our websites. I have around 9 websites and I'll be honest, I probably only work on 4 of them each month. The other ones are parked aside and get worked on every now and again, so they are neglected. So in my opinion, you should focus on one website until that is successful. And then you take your learnings and hopefully some of the revenue you are now earning and invest it into a new project.
Hey guys, Chris here from Niche Safari, and thanks Keith for having me on the channel. The question is, should you build multiple sites or focus on one? And my answer has changed over time. But my general answer is, well, what is your goal? If your goal is to have a conservative $100,000 a year business, then perhaps you could have a couple of different sites. And that's because there's a lot of protection here. If you've got 3 websites, say you've got 3 websites and they're each making $4,000 a month, you're making $12,000 per month. That's a really nice middle class income for most people. If one of those sites crashes, you're still making $8,000 a month, and then, that's still a really nice, comfortable living for you. So there's some conservativeness and there's some safety in those 3 sites to $10,000 sort of mindset. There is a reason you might not want to do that though. And the reason is, it's going to be 3 businesses that you're running. You're going to be focusing your time and separating it on 3 different things. You're essentially multitasking. But if you want to hit $100,000 a month instead of $100,000 a year, chances are the best way to do that is with one website, which is one brand, and it is your entire focus. Multitasking usually is going to split your focus and bring down your performance, essentially. If you focus really hard on one business, you can scale that thing to the moon. You treat it like a full-time business, just as like if you owned a retail shop down the street. Focus on that one brand and take it to the moon. That is the way that you're going to get that really big money at the end of the day. So let's go back to the start. It does depend. And it depends whether you want to be conservative and create that nice, safe, middle class living from a portfolio, or you want to be rich. If you want to be rich, you're going to have to take more risk, but focus on one site, one brand, and take it to the moon.
Hey there, it's Emily Dyson here, and the question is, should beginners focus on building one website at a time, or should they focus on building multiple sites? And in my opinion, I think the beginners should focus on building just one website at a time. There's so much work and time and effort that goes into running a successful website. And I feel like if you're just doing all the work yourself, you're not outsourcing anything, you're going to find that it's going to be so time consuming to build multiple sites at a time. If you just focus on one, you can focus on doing that really, really well, which hopefully means that you get further. You start seeing growth much quicker. I've also found that in my own experience, when I've been focusing on multiple sites or multiple projects, I've started to feel really burnt out and unmotivated, and I haven't been able to stick with things consistently. But with that being said, I feel like building multiple sites offers more security, more financial security. If something goes wrong with one website, you've also got those other sites there to help, prop you up. So, taking all that into consideration, building multiple websites is possibly less risky, but I feel like you'll get further and you'll see success much quicker by just focusing on one website. I hope that helps.
Hi, Mark Myles from Niche Website Builders here. So in answer to Keith's question, you want to build out one site first. There's a number of reasons for that. One, you just want to make sure you've cracked the formula for success before you go replicating your approach on multiple sites, which makes sense, right? You just want to make sure you're doing it right and you've got it right before you go and do it again and again, building out new sites. It also just takes time. It's just far better to double down and triple down on one site. You're going to get to success sooner rather than trying to spread your time over multiple sites. Because as that site gets bigger, It's going to start gaining authority. Hopefully it's going to start picking up some backlinks, and just investing that time in a bigger site. Google's going to take it more seriously, more quickly. So trust me, it's just going to be better to do it on one site rather than multiple sites, even if it sounds counterintuitive. The one exception to that is that I say is if you're cash rich or time poor, then you can outsource scaling up more quickly if using a trusted partner such as niche website builders. Of course, we've got experience building hundreds of sites out for customers, and we fast tracked portfolios for a number of customers over the last couple of years. So that would be the one exception. But if you're kind of doing it all yourself, I would absolutely say you should absolutely focus on one site, make sure you get it right, and do the same again for the second site, and then start building up your portfolio.
Hey, what's up, Keith? Thank you so much for having me on. So there's one thing that I learned when I was just getting started with this blogging business. I remember I was asking a mentor of mine a specific question, is how many sites should I start? It's a very similar question that everyone is asking today. And he told me this one very crucial thing that literally blew my mind and kind of changed everything. He said, you only need one site to make a full-time income. Only one. So when you are first getting started, I definitely recommend focusing on one particular site and getting it profitable, getting it to the point to where it is making money. After you have gotten it to a certain point where you're like, okay, I think I've peaked so far with where this site can go, then it's time to go ahead and rinse and repeat that exact same process with starting a second site or even a third site. But at that point, you're already experienced enough to make that process and cut it down to a quarter of the time that it may have taken you to build that first site. So stick with one site, and then after a while, after you've gotten it to the point to where you think that you have gotten it as far as it can go, then go ahead and start a second site.
When to start a second site was a question that I asked so many times in live streams and of more experienced bloggers. I really wanted to start a second site at about the 6-month mark, but I went ahead and waited until my site was 8 months old. At that time, we were able to devote a little bit of money to hiring a writer. My writing speed had sped up and I had almost 100 articles on my first site. So I had the ball really rolling on that first site and I was able to ramp up my production. We also are involved in the hobby, the niche for my second site, so research wasn't as demanding as it is for my first site. I think you have to get over the emotional trauma of those first couple weeks of working on a blog. The stats are just so up and down. Nothing is happening, but it seems like something should be happening. So to make the transition from one site to 2 sites possible for me, I also decided not to track the analytics at all. I haven't looked at the analytics for the site I launched in October one time. And I think that really allowed me to focus on creating content for both sites, because really we know that nothing's happening. Right now in month 4 of my site, nothing's happening. And if I look at the stats, it'll only produce anxiety. So if you have a plan, you have the resources, launch your second site, but really wait a couple months and think about the idea before you commit. It's a lot of work.
Hola Keith, it's Alex here from WP Eagle. Thanks very much for inviting me onto this video. So the question that you put to me was, should you focus on a single site or should you spread your resources across a few different sites? It's a great question. And well, in my experience, I think it's good to do both of those things. I think you should start with a few sites, 2, 3, maybe 4, and kind of spread yourself across those sites in terms of content and the work that you do on them, link building, the usual stuff. Do that for a few months, and after a few months, you should get an idea in terms of which sites show potential, which ones are growing, which ones are gaining in traffic, which ones you enjoy working on, which ones have got the most potential for good content. Because it's very difficult to predict all of those things, very difficult. So the only real way to know is to actually do it. Now, of course, once you've got this information after a few months, and you can see which sites are growing, which sites you like working on, which sites have got the greatest content potential, you can then start to focus. And this is what I'm doing right now with my sites. I've got 4 sites on the go, 4 main sites. 2 of them are growing really nicely and are great fun to work on, and I've got loads of content ideas. The other 2, not so much. So I'm kind of parking those 2 and I'm focusing on the 2 that are showing the most potential. So yeah, that's my answer to the question. Should you focus on one or spread yourself across a few? Do both. Start with a few and then start to focus once you know which sites are working well. Again, thanks for inviting me on, and I'll see everyone soon.
Well, some really good advice there, and I'd like to thank everybody who took part in this video for sharing their thoughts on this important topic. I do hope you found the video useful, and if you did, please give the video a thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It really does help me and the channel out. Thanks for watching, folks, and I will catch you on the next video.